Admiral stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. The ship stretched over 4 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with composite armor that could withstand the fury of a dying star. Around him, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew monitored the 17 other dreadnoughts in his battle group. This was how proper warfare looked. Ships so large they cast shadows on planets, armor so thick that energy weapons needed minutes of sustained fire to penetrate, shields powered by exotic matter cores that bent space itself. Every vessel followed the sacred protocols of war that had kept peace in the galaxy for 3,000 years. "Admiral, we are receiving the daily intelligence briefing from High Command," announced his communications officer, Lieutenant. The young officer's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as data flowed across his console. Nodded his massive head. The intelligence reports were always the same these days. The Outer Rim territories remained quiet. Trade flowed smoothly along the established hyperspace routes. The occasional pirate raid was dealt with swiftly by patrol ships. Everything was as it should be. "Sir, there is one item of note," continued. "The humans in the Vega sector have requested a formal naval treaty." A low rumble of amusement echoed around the bridge. Mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. Humans, the species to stumble into space barely 2 centuries ago. Their ships were tiny metal boxes held together with primitive welding. They had no exotic matter technology, no proper shielding, and their largest vessels barely qualified as patrol boats. "What do the humans want now?" asked Commander On, second in command. "More trade concessions. Permission to establish another mining colony." Checked his console again. They wished to negotiate territorial boundaries and rules of engagement for their colonial defense forces. The bridge erupted in more laughter. Rules of engagement. The humans had perhaps 50 ships in their entire fleet, none longer than 300 meters. The sacred protocols required capital ships to be at least 2 kilometers long just to participate in formal combat. Human vessels were so small they wouldn't even register on proper targeting systems. Had seen the intelligence reports on human military capability. They used chemical rockets for propulsion instead of gravity manipulation. Their armor was made from refined metals instead of exotic matter composites. Their weapons fired simple energy beams that couldn't penetrate even basic shielding. The Galactic Council had rated humanity at 2.3 on the scale, barely above primitive. "Send a standard response," ordered. "Tell them that when they build proper warships, we will consider proper negotiations." The truth was that the Galactic Confederation had no interest in formal treaties with humanity. Humans controlled only a dozen star systems on the far edge of known space. Their colonies produced nothing that couldn't be found elsewhere. They posed no threat to established powers and offered no strategic advantage. They were simply too small and too primitive to matter. The sacred protocols had been written by the greatest military minds in galactic history. Every rule had been tested in countless battles over 3. Ship-to-ship combat required vessels of substantial size to mount effective weapons and defenses. Armor must be thick enough to withstand sustained bombardment. Energy shields must be powerful enough to deflect multiple simultaneous attacks. Weapons must announce their firing sequences with energy buildup patterns, allowing honorable opponents time to respond with defensive measures. These weren't arbitrary rules. They represented the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 species across 10,000 conflicts. Any civilization that couldn't follow the protocols simply wasn't advanced enough to participate in serious warfare. Remembered his first battle, fought according to these same principles 40 years ago. 2 fleets had faced each other across empty space, massive dreadnoughts arranged in formal battle lines. Weapons had charged slowly, their energy signatures visible across vast distances. Shields had flared as beams struck home. Ships had maneuvered in graceful arcs, their tremendous mass requiring careful planning for every turn. It had been beautiful. It had been honorable. It had been war as it should be fought. Human ships couldn't even participate in such a battle. They lacked the size for proper weapons, the armor for sustained combat, or the shielding to survive a single direct hit from a dreadnought's main battery. Their entire fleet could be destroyed by a single properly equipped patrol group. "Sir," spoke again, "High Command has assigned a diplomatic to handle the human request. Sub-Administrator will meet with their representatives next week." Nodded absently. Sub-Administrator was a minor functionary in the Colonial Affairs Department. Sending him to meet with human diplomats was almost insulting, but humans wouldn't recognize the slight. They probably considered it an honor to speak with any Confederation official. The Admiral turned his attention back to more important matters. His battle group was conducting routine patrols along the major trade routes. Pirates had been growing bolder lately, attacking merchant convoys with fast attack ships that fled before proper reinforcements could arrive. It was a minor annoyance, but one that required attention. Proper pirates understood their place in the galactic order. They used small, fast ships for hit-and-run attacks on civilian targets. When confronted by military vessels, they either surrendered honorably or fled immediately. None would be foolish enough to engage a dreadnought in direct combat. His reverie was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the patrol ship Swift Retribution. Captain appeared on the main screen, his expression troubled. "Admiral, we have encountered a human vessel in the disputed zone near Vega Prime. The ship refuses to acknowledge our authority and has threatened to fire upon us." More laughter echoed around the bridge. A human ship threatening a proper patrol vessel. Captain's ship was over 2 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to level a continent. What could a tiny human craft possibly do against such overwhelming superiority? "What class of vessel are we dealing with, Captain?" asked. "Sir, that's the strange part. Our sensors show a ship only 180 meters in length, but it's configured as a warship rather than a transport or courier vessel. Its energy signature is unusual." Felt a flicker of interest. Perhaps the humans had finally built something worth noticing. "Investigate further, Captain. If the humans wish to play at being warriors, perhaps it's time they learned what real military power looks like." "Understood, Admiral. Swift Retribution out." As the transmission ended, settled back into his command throne. Soon the humans would learn their proper place in the galactic order. The sacred protocols had stood for 3,000 years for good reason. No upstart species with primitive technology could challenge the established way of war. Captain studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. The human vessel hung in space before them, small and dark against the star field. At first glance, it looked like any other primitive human ship, a simple metal hull welded together without elegance or proper engineering principles. But the readings made no sense. "Tactical, run another deep scan of that vessel," ordered his weapons officer. The bridge crew of the Swift Retribution worked efficiently around him, though he could sense their puzzlement. This was supposed to be a routine patrol mission. "Sir, the scan confirms our previous readings," reported Lieutenant. "The vessel measures 180 meters from bow to stern. Hull composition appears to be steel alloys with ceramic composite sections. No armor detected." Clicked his mandibles in annoyance. A ship that small couldn't possibly mount effective weapons or defenses. By galactic standards, it was barely larger than a shuttle craft, yet something about it felt wrong. "What about the power signature?" he asked. Lieutenant's 4 arms moved across his console as he analyzed the data. "This is where it gets strange, sir. Instead of a single exotic matter core, we're detecting over 200 separate fusion reactors. The power distribution doesn't follow any known pattern." 200 reactors. Had never heard of such a design. Proper warships used massive exotic matter cores that could power weapons, shields, and engines simultaneously. Why would anyone scatter their power generation across hundreds of smaller units? "Sir, the vessel is moving," announced the navigation officer. Looked at the main display and felt his blood chill. The human ship was indeed moving, but not in any way that made sense. Instead of the long, graceful arc that any proper vessel would follow when changing course, it simply pointed in a new direction and accelerated. The G-forces from such a maneuver should have crushed any crew inside. "How fast is it accelerating?" he asked. 47 standard Gs, sir," came the reply. "Constant acceleration with no apparent stress to the hull structure." That was impossible. The most advanced inertial dampening systems could barely manage 20 Gs without liquefying organic crew members. Yet this primitive human ship was pulling nearly 50 Gs like it was nothing. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human vessel," reported communications officer. "On screen," ordered. The main display flickered and showed the interior of the human ship's bridge. It was cramped and functional, with exposed pipes and cables running along the walls. At the center sat a human female wearing what appeared to be a simple gray uniform. Her skin was pale, her hair dark and pulled back in a practical manner, but her eyes held an intelligence that made uneasy. "This is Captain of the United Earth ship Defiant," the human said in clear galactic standard. "You are in violation of the Terran Colonial Defense Zone. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The bridge crew of the Swift Retribution erupted in laughter. A ship less than 200 meters long was threatening a dreadnought. Himself couldn't suppress a rumbling chuckle. "Captain," he replied, "I am captain of the Confederation patrol ship Swift Retribution. You are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted from this system. This space falls under Confederation jurisdiction." The human captain's expression didn't change. "Captain, you have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from Terran space. This is your only warning." More laughter echoed around the bridge. Studied the human female on his screen. She seemed completely serious, but that made no sense. She had to know that her tiny ship stood no chance against a proper patrol vessel. The Swift Retribution the human ship by a factor of 50 and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "Lieutenant, arm the forward plasma array," ordered. "We'll fire a warning shot across their bow. Once they see real firepower, they'll come to their senses." "Sir, plasma array charging. We'll reach firing capacity in 40 seconds." This was how proper naval engagement worked. Weapons systems announced their intent by building up energy over time. This gave opponents a chance to surrender or flee before actual combat began. It was civilized. It was honorable. It prevented unnecessary destruction. But as the plasma array charged, something impossible happened. The human ship simply vanished from their sensors. "Report," barked. "Sir, the vessel, it's gone," stammered the sensor operator. "No, wait, it's behind us." Spun to look at the rear display. There, impossibly, hung the human ship. It had somehow moved from directly ahead of them to a position behind and above their stern in less than 10 seconds. The maneuver should have been physically impossible for any vessel, but especially one with organic crew members. "How did they do that?" he demanded. "Sir, I'm not sure. Our sensors tracked rapid acceleration, but the G-forces involved would have killed any living crew. The ship pulled over 200 Gs during the maneuver." Before anyone could respond, new alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. "Captain, we're being targeted," shouted Lieutenant. "Multiple targeting systems have locked onto our vessel." Felt his confidence evaporating. The human ship had somehow gotten behind them and achieved weapon lock before they could even complete their warning shot. Worse, the targeting systems showed no energy buildup, no charging patterns, nothing that would indicate the type of weapons being used. "Sir, incoming projectiles." Impossible, breathed. Our sensors would detect any energy weapons discharge. Sir, these aren't energy weapons. They appear to be kinetic projectiles, moving at significant fractions of light speed. Kinetic weapons. Who used kinetic weapons in modern warfare? They were primitive, unpredictable, and completely ineffective against proper energy shielding. But as the projectiles struck, the swift retribution discovered something terrifying. The ship's shields, designed to deflect energy beams and plasma bolts, simply couldn't stop solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectiles punched through the energy barriers like they weren't even there. Sparks flew from control panels around the bridge as the kinetic rounds found their targets with surgical precision. Not random hits, but carefully aimed strikes at communications arrays, weapon targeting systems, and engine controls. The human ship wasn't trying to destroy them. It was systematically disabling their ability to fight back. Sir, main communications are down. Weapon targeting is offline. Engine control is not responding. Captain stared at the tactical display in shock. In less than 30 seconds, his mighty patrol ship had been reduced to a floating hulk. Not destroyed, but completely helpless. The human vessel had done something that shouldn't be possible. It had defeated a superior opponent without following any recognized rules of engagement. A new transmission came through their damaged communication system, the signal somehow cutting through their disabled electronics. "Captain," came Captain's voice, calm and professional. "Your vessel is now disabled but intact. Your crew is unharmed. Consider this a demonstration of human resolve. The next time Confederation ships enter Terran space uninvited, we may not be so gentle." The transmission ended, and watched helplessly as the impossible human ship accelerated away, disappearing into the darkness between stars with the same impossible agility it had demonstrated during the engagement. As his crew worked frantically to restore basic systems, realized that everything he thought he knew about space warfare had just been proven wrong. The sacred protocols, the rules that had governed galactic conflict for three, meant nothing to an opponent who simply refused to play by them. For the first time in his long military career, Captain felt afraid. Admiral received the emergency transmission from Captain 3 hours after the incident. What he heard made him question the patrol captain's sanity. "A single human ship disabled the swift retribution," repeated, his massive frame leaning forward in his command chair. "Captain, the swift retribution is a Class VII patrol dreadnought. It carries enough firepower to level a continent." "Yes, sir," voice crackled through the damaged communication system. "The human vessel used weapons and tactics completely outside established parameters. We were unable to respond effectively." Studied the tactical data that accompanied the report. The readings made no sense. A ship that small shouldn't be able to generate enough power for effective weapons. The maneuvers described were physically impossible. The entire engagement violated every principle of modern space warfare. "Admiral," his intelligence officer spoke up, "we're receiving similar reports from 2 other patrol ships in the Vega sector. Both encountered human vessels. Both report similar impossible capabilities." This was becoming serious. 3 disabled patrol ships meant either a coordinated human attack or some new technology that changed the rules of engagement. Either way, it demanded immediate investigation. "Prepare my personal task force," ordered. "We're going to see these impossible human ships for ourselves." 2 days later, Admiral led a formation of 6 dreadnoughts toward the coordinates where the swift retribution had been disabled. His flagship, the Eternal Dominance, was the pinnacle of Confederation naval engineering. At 4 kilometers long, it carried enough exotic matter weaponry to crack planets. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against it in direct combat. "Admiral, sensors detect 4 human vessels at the edge of the system," reported his tactical officer. "Range, 2 million kilometers." studied the tactical display. 4 small ships arranged in what appeared to be a loose formation. Each was different from the others, unusual for military vessels, which typically followed standardized designs. "Magnify and identify," he ordered. The main screen showed 4 ships that looked nothing like proper warships. One was long and narrow, bristling with strange projections. Another was broad and flat, covered in what appeared to be sensor arrays. The third looked almost normal except for a massive structure running down its center. The fourth was the smallest, but moved with the same impossible agility that Captain had described. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human formation." On screen, the display showed the same human female that had spoken to Captain. Captain sat in what appeared to be the same cramped, functional bridge. "Admiral," she said, somehow knowing his identity, "welcome to the Vega sector. I'm Commodore of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. You're currently in violation of our territorial space." Commodore replied, emphasizing her presumptuous promotion, "You are facing 6 Confederation dreadnoughts. Your 4 small ships are vastly. Surrender now, and we'll discuss this territorial dispute in a civilized manner." Smiled, an expression that somehow looked predatory on her alien features. "Admiral, you're right that we're by conventional standards. Would you like a demonstration of unconventional standards?" Before could respond, his tactical officer began shouting warnings. "Sir, massive energy spike from the narrow human vessel. Unknown weapon type charging." On the display, the long, narrow ship had rotated to face the Confederation formation. Along its central structure, energy began building in a pattern unlike anything in the tactical databases. "Admiral, that appears to be some kind of kinetic accelerator," the tactical officer reported. "But the energy levels are impossible for a ship that size." "All ships, raise shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers," ordered. Against kinetic weapons, the best defense was not to be where the projectile was aimed. But the human ships didn't fire at the dreadnoughts. Instead, the narrow vessel targeted an empty asteroid floating nearby. What happened next? Every principle of physics that understood. A projectile, apparently solid matter, erupted from the human ship at nearly 20% of light speed. It struck the asteroid and simply erased it. Not shattered it, not vaporized it. The asteroid was there one moment and gone the next, converted to expanding plasma by the sheer kinetic energy of impact. "Admiral," his science officer stammered, "the energy transfer from that impact. It's equivalent to a 30-megaton explosive device." Stared at the expanding cloud of superheated gas where the asteroid had been. A single shot from a ship less than 300 meters long had just demonstrated firepower that rivaled his main battery. But that was impossible. Where did they get the energy? How did they accelerate matter to such velocities? "Sir, new contacts. The flat human vessel has launched approximately 4,000 small objects." On the tactical display, a swarm of tiny dots erupted from the second human ship. Each dot was smaller than a fighter craft, but they moved with purpose and coordination that suggested intelligent guidance. "Sir, they appear to be some kind of autonomous weapon system. Each unit carries a small kinetic warhead, but there are so many of them." Understood immediately. His ship's point defense systems were designed to stop large targets, incoming torpedoes, fighter craft, debris. They couldn't track and destroy thousands of tiny, independently maneuvering projectiles simultaneously. "All ships, maximum defensive fire, destroy those missiles." The 6 dreadnoughts opened fire with their point defense arrays, brilliant energy beams lancing out to destroy the approaching swarm. They succeeded in eliminating perhaps half of the incoming projectiles, but the rest continued their approach, constantly changing course to avoid targeting solutions. But again, the humans didn't target the dreadnoughts themselves. Instead, the missile swarm struck the disabled hulk of an old freight hauler that had been drifting nearby. The coordinated impact of 2,000 kinetic warheads tore the derelict ship apart completely. "Another demonstration," came Commodore's voice over the communication channel. "We call that saturation bombardment. Your point defense systems are very impressive, Admiral. They stopped almost 50% of our missiles." 50%? Against 4,000 targets, that meant 2,000 warheads had gotten through, if those had been targeted at his ships. But the demonstration wasn't over. The third human vessel began moving in ways that hurts brain to watch. It wasn't following normal physics, no acceleration curves, no momentum conservation. It simply pointed in different directions and moved there instantly, as if space itself was being folded around it. "Sir, that vessel is somehow manipulating local space-time, but they don't have exotic matter technology." As watched, the maneuverable human ship began jamming his fleet's communications using some kind of broad-spectrum interference. But this wasn't normal jamming. It was drowning out signals across frequencies that should be physically impossible to disrupt simultaneously. "Sir, we're losing communication between ships. The interference is affecting everything: tactical coordination, sensor sharing, even internal ship communications." The fourth human vessel had remained relatively still throughout the demonstrations, but now it began broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. "Admiral," came a different human voice, "my name is Captain Martinez of the UES Audacious. I'm currently inside your ship's computer systems. Your tactical database makes for fascinating reading." Impossible. The Eternal Dominants had the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. No external signal could penetrate their firewalls, especially not from a primitive human ship. "Sir, we're detecting unauthorized access to multiple ship systems. The humans have somehow bypassed our security protocols." "How?" demanded. "I'm not sure, sir. They're using some kind of adaptive artificial intelligence that learns our security measures faster than we can implement new ones." Commodore appeared on the main screen again. "Admiral, as you can see, we have various ways to deal with larger, more conventionally armed opponents. The question is, do you want to continue this demonstration, or would you prefer to discuss territorial boundaries like civilized beings?" Looked around his bridge at the chaos. His communications were jammed, his computers were compromised, and he had just witnessed firepower that could destroy his ships from ranges where they couldn't effectively respond. Worse, the humans had demonstrated all of this without actually attacking him. They could have destroyed his entire task force in the first 60 seconds of engagement. Instead, they had chosen to educate him about the new realities of space warfare. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral faced an opponent who was smaller, less numerous, and apparently far more dangerous than anything he had prepared for. "Commodore," he said slowly, "I believe we should indeed discuss territorial boundaries. Your demonstrations have been most educational." The human smiled again. "Excellent, Admiral. Perhaps it's time the galaxy learned that there's more than one way to fight a war." The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council convened within hours of Admiral's report. Representatives from 47 species filled the great chamber on the capital world of Prime, their various forms reflecting millions of years of evolution across countless star systems. High Admiral, Supreme Commander of Confederation Forces, stood before the assembled delegates. His ancient frame carried the scars of 100 battles fought according to the sacred protocols. Now, for the first time in his long career, those protocols had failed completely. The human vessels demonstrated capabilities that our entire strategic doctrine considers impossible, he announced to the silent chamber. They have invalidated 3,000 years of military development in a matter of days. Delegate Prime of the Hegemony Council rose from his crystalline throne. "High Admiral, surely you exaggerate. These humans are a primitive species. They lack exotic matter technology, proper shielding, or standardized ship designs. How could they possibly threaten our established naval superiority? Admiral stepped forward. Delegate Prime, that's exactly the problem. We assumed that our way of building and fighting with ships was the only effective way. The humans never made that assumption. On the great display screen, tactical recordings from the engagement played for the assembled delegates. Ship after ship of human design appeared, each one breaking fundamental rules of galactic naval architecture. The UES, unconventional, narrated, carries a single massive kinetic accelerator that can strike targets at ranges exceeding our maximum weapons range. Instead of mounting multiple weapon systems like our dreadnoughts, they focused everything on one perfect shot. The recording showed the asteroid being erased by the kinetic strike. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The UES Relentless deploys autonomous missile swarms that overwhelm point defenses through sheer numbers. Rather than building larger, more powerful missiles, they built thousands of smaller ones that are impossible to stop completely. The UES Audacious specializes in electronic warfare using artificial intelligence systems that adapt faster than our security measures can respond. They don't try to break our defenses. They simply learn them and walk through them. And the UES Defiant demonstrates maneuverability that should be impossible for any ship with living crew. They've somehow solved the inertial dampening problem in ways our physicists claim can't work. Delegate Prime's crystalline features reflected confusion and growing alarm. But how? They lack our technological advantages. They have no exotic matter, no gravitational manipulation, no quantum shielding. That's exactly why they succeeded, Admiral replied. They didn't try to copy our technology. They developed their own solutions to the problems of space warfare. High Admiral activated another display. Our intelligence services have been analyzing human ship designs captured from sensor data. Every vessel is different, but they all share common principles that violate our understanding of proper naval architecture. The display showed cutaway diagrams of human ships. Delegate after delegate leaned forward to study the impossible designs. Human ships are built around modularity and redundancy, explained. Instead of single large systems, they use hundreds of smaller ones. Destroy one fusion reactor and they have 50 more. Damage one thruster cluster and a dozen others compensate. Hit their main computer and backup systems take over instantly. Moreover, they design every ship for a specific mission rather than trying to create general-purpose vessels. The unconventional exists only to kill other ships at extreme range. The relentless exists only to overwhelm defenses. The audacious exists only to disrupt enemy coordination. Delegate K of the Trade Federation spoke up. Surely our numerical superiority compensates for their technological tricks. We have thousands of ships to their dozens. That's the most disturbing part, Admiral answered. The humans haven't built a large fleet because they don't need one. Each of their ships can disable multiple conventional vessels. They've achieved force multiplication through superior design rather than superior numbers. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Confederation's military doctrine was based on overwhelming firepower delivered by massive fleets of standardized dreadnoughts. If individual ships could be designed to defeat multiple conventional vessels, then numerical superiority became meaningless. High Admiral, asked Delegate Prime, what is your assessment of human intentions? Are they planning to expand beyond their current territories? Ancient features showed something approaching respect. Our intelligence suggests something more troubling, Delegate Prime. The humans weren't preparing to attack us. They were preparing to defend themselves from us. Explain. Every human ship design appears optimized for asymmetric warfare against larger, more technologically advanced opponents. They assumed from the beginning that they would face enemies with superior numbers and conventional technology, so they built ships specifically designed to neutralize those advantages. Admiral stepped forward again. The humans studied our ships, our tactics, our protocols. They identified the assumptions built into our military doctrine and then designed weapons to exploit those assumptions. We fight according to rules that have worked for 3,000 years. They fight according to rules that make our rules irrelevant. But why different ship types? Asked another delegate. Our standardized designs allow for coordinated tactics and logistics. Human ships are designed to work together in unexpected ways, explained. The audacious jams enemy communications while the relentless overwhelms defenses and the unconventional delivers killing blows from extreme range. Each ship covers the weaknesses of the others. More importantly, added, they don't rely on standardized tactics. Each engagement is different because each ship can perform different roles. Our tactical databases contain responses for every known ship type. The humans simply built ship types that don't exist in our databases. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as representatives from dozens of species discussed the implications. If humanity could invalidate galactic military doctrine so completely, what did that mean for the balance of power that had maintained peace for? High Admiral, Delegate Prime's voice cut through the noise. What is your recommendation? Stood silent for a long moment, considering. The humans have demonstrated that our way of warfare is no longer the only way. Perhaps it was never the only way, and we simply became too comfortable with our own success. They've shown us something important. Innovation defeats tradition. Adaptation beats standardization. Intelligence outweighs firepower. He paused. We can either learn from this, or we can continue following protocols that no longer work against intelligent opponents. Admiral added, Commodore has requested a formal meeting to discuss territorial boundaries and rules of engagement. I recommend we accept. Rules of engagement? Delegate asked. What rules could possibly apply to opponents who ignore all existing rules? That, replied, is exactly what we need to find out. The humans have changed the nature of warfare itself. We can either adapt to that change or become irrelevant to it. The Great Chamber fell silent again as the most powerful military alliance in galactic history contemplated a truth that should have been obvious. There was always more than one solution to any problem, and assuming your solution was the only solution was the first step toward defeat. The age of the sacred protocols was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. The conference took place aboard the UES Defiant, a choice that forced the alien delegation to experience human naval architecture firsthand. Admiral had to duck his massive frame through doorways designed for smaller human proportions. High Admiral's ancient joints struggled with corridors that prioritized efficiency over grandeur. Everything about the ship felt wrong to galactic sensibilities. Exposed pipes and cables ran along the walls instead of being hidden behind elegant panels. Control stations were cramped and functional rather than impressive displays of technological mastery. The bridge looked more like the cockpit of a fighter craft than the command center of a warship. Commodore met them at the airlock personally, another breach of diplomatic protocol. Military leaders of her apparent importance should have remained in their command centers, while subordinates handled ceremonial duties. Admiral, High Admiral, welcome aboard the Defiant, she said, offering a gesture that their translators identified as a respectful greeting among humans. I apologize for the cramped quarters. We built our ships for fighting, not for entertaining dignitaries. As they made their way to the conference room, studied every detail of the ship's interior. The design philosophy was completely alien to galactic thinking. Where Confederation ships emphasized impressive displays of power and technological sophistication, human ships focused entirely on function. Commodore asked, "May I inquire about your crew size?" This ship seems designed for a much smaller complement than vessels of similar capability. 57 personnel replied. Our automation handles most routine functions, freeing the crew to focus on tactical decisions and damage control. Was shocked. His own flagship carried over 3,000 crew members to operate systems that were supposedly more advanced than anything humans possessed. Yet this tiny ship with a fraction of the crew had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded his own vessel. The conference room was as Spartan as the rest of the ship, a simple table surrounded by functional chairs, with displays showing tactical information and star charts. No ceremonial decorations, no impressive artwork, no symbols of national power. Just a room designed for making decisions. Please be seated, offered. Before we begin formal negotiations, I think it's important that you understand what you're really dealing with. She activated a wall display that showed human star charts marking their territorial claims. Was surprised to see how modest they were. 12-star systems, most of them barely worth colonizing by galactic standards. This is all we want, said simply. 12 systems on the edge of nowhere, far from your major trade routes and strategic interests. We're not seeking to expand into your territory or challenge your authority over established space. Then why, asked, have you developed such advanced military capabilities? Your ships could threaten forces far beyond what would be necessary to defend such a small area. Smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. High Admiral, may I ask you a question? When humans first ventured into space, what was your government's reaction? Consulted his notes. You were classified as a developing spacefaring species. Minimal technological capability, no strategic importance. Standard protocol was to monitor your progress and establish contact when you developed adequate technology for meaningful interaction. Exactly, nodded. You looked at us and saw primitives who posed no threat, but what you didn't consider is how things looked from our perspective. She activated another display showing galactic territorial maps. From a human viewpoint, they were surrounded by vast empires spanning thousands of star systems, each one possessing technology and firepower beyond anything Earth could match. We knew that eventually we would encounter superior alien civilizations. The math was inevitable. Any species that achieved interstellar travel thousands of years before us would have overwhelming advantages in numbers, technology, and military experience. So we had a choice, she continued. We could try to match your capabilities directly, which would take we didn't have, or we could develop ways to neutralize your advantages through superior tactics and unconventional technology. Admiral leaned forward. You designed your entire military doctrine around fighting us before you even met us. We designed our military doctrine around defending ourselves against anyone who might see us as a threat or an opportunity for conquest, corrected. We studied every historical example we could find of advanced civilizations encountering primitive ones. The results were rarely favorable to the primitives. Felt a grudging respect for the human approach. They had faced the same problem that countless species had faced when encountering the galactic community: technological inferiority, with no time to catch up through conventional development. But most species in your situation would seek protection through alliance or submission, he observed. Why did you choose to develop independent military capability? Because we learned something important from our own history, replied. Alliances change. Protectors become conquerors. The only security worth having is the security you can provide for yourself. She stood and walked to another display showing human ship designs. Every one of our vessels was built around the same core principle: asymmetric warfare against technologically superior opponents. We assumed from the beginning that we would face enemies with better technology, larger ships, and greater numbers. So we developed countermeasures, kinetic weapons that ignore energy shields, electronic warfare that turns advanced computers into vulnerabilities, maneuverability that makes size irrelevant, swarm tactics that overwhelm defense systems through sheer numbers of small targets. Admiral studied the ship designs with new understanding. You didn't try to build better versions of our ships. You built ships designed specifically to destroy our ships. Exactly, confirmed. We identified the assumptions built into galactic military doctrine and then designed weapons to exploit those assumptions. You fight according to rules that have worked for 3,000 years. We fight according to rules designed to make your rules irrelevant. High Admiral was beginning to understand the larger implications. But if your defensive capabilities are so advanced, why are you willing to negotiate territorial boundaries? You could potentially expand your space through military action. Returned to her seat, her expression becoming serious. Because, High Admiral, we're not conquerors. We never were. Everything we've built is designed for defense, not expansion. We want to live in peace, but we've prepared for war. Moreover, she continued, we understand something that galactic civilization seems to have forgotten: warfare evolves. Today, our unconventional approach gives us advantages. Tomorrow, you'll develop countermeasures. The cycle continues. Victory belongs to whoever adapts fastest, not whoever has the biggest ships. Consider this. You're saying that military innovation is more important than military production. I'm saying that the moment you assume your way of fighting is the only way of fighting, you've already lost to someone who thinks differently, replied. We succeeded against your forces because we refused to accept your assumptions about how space warfare should work. Admiral leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of centuries of military tradition being. Commodore, what exactly are you proposing? Formal recognition of human territorial claims in the Vega sector, said. Mutual non-aggression agreements, and perhaps most importantly, acknowledgement that there's more than one way to approach military engineering and space combat. The old sacred protocols worked when everyone agreed to follow them, she continued. But they only worked because everyone agreed to follow them. We never agreed to those rules because nobody ever asked us to agree to them. Found himself nodding slowly. You're proposing new rules of engagement that account for unconventional warfare. I'm proposing that we all acknowledge what should have been obvious from the beginning: innovation beats tradition, adaptation beats standardization, and intelligence outweighs firepower. Any military doctrine that doesn't account for those principles will eventually fail against opponents who do account for them. The negotiations continued for 3 days, but the fundamental agreements were reached in that first conversation. The Vega Accords, as they came to be known, established formal recognition of human territorial claims and created the first military treaty specifically designed to address asymmetric warfare capabilities. More importantly, they marked the end of the sacred protocols as the sole doctrine governing galactic military affairs. The age of standardized warfare was ending, replaced by an era where innovation and adaptation would determine survival. Admiral's final log entry, recorded as the alien delegation departed the Defiant, reflected the magnitude of the change. Today we learned that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who breaks your rules, but the one who never agreed to play by them in the first place. The humans have taught us that there is always another way to solve any problem. We had forgotten this truth in our 3,000 years of success. They reminded us that the moment we stop innovating, someone else will innovate past us. The galaxy is changing. Those who adapt will survive. Those who cling to tradition will become irrelevant. The humans have shown us the future of warfare, not through superior technology, but through superior thinking. As the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, bound for their small cluster of systems on the edge of known space, the galactic community began the long process of rethinking everything they thought they knew about military power. The age of human innovation had begun.